Hello, I'm Esther Gitu Yuat. It's Monday, February 7th. This is Africa 54.
At least 10 people are dead and thousands displaced in Madagascar in the wake of Cyclone Batsirai. A new report blasts South African authorities for failing to foresee a wave of violence in July 2021 that left hundreds dead. And celebrations in Senegal as the country wins its first Africa Cup of Nations tournament.
We begin our broadcast with the aftermath of Cyclone Batsirai after it slammed into Madagascar over the weekend. Powerful winds and torrential rain lashed the eastern town of Manangeri after the cyclone made landfall on Saturday. At least 10 people were killed, according to Reuters. Video posted on social media and shot from a balcony showed vegetation bent by strong winds, as well as some damaged and collapsed buildings. Heavy rain inundated the roads as Basirai swept inland late Saturday, blasting Madagascar's eastern coastline with wind speeds of 165 kilometers per hour. As many as 150,000 people may be displaced. Madagascar is also suffering from power outages and flooding. Now to Nigeria, where an oil operating company on Monday says at least 3 people died when the oil storage and production vessel Trinity Spirit exploded last week. 4 crew are still missing. The Sheba Exploration and Production Company says the vessel had 10 crew members on board when it exploded last Wednesday, adding that 3 were found dead Sunday, but 3 others had been found alive. The vessel was not producing oil at the time of the blast, and the consortium running the oil field had lost its production license in 2019. 2 oil industry sources and an environmental group says the vessel was old and was poorly maintained before the explosion. The Health of Mother Foundation, which tracks Nigerian oil spills, says the vessel had outlived its lifespan of 20 years and should have been decommissioned. Sadly, on Monday, Moroccans bid farewell to 5-year-old Ryan Aram, who was buried. Ryan's tragic fall in a narrow 32-meter well attracted worldwide attention as rescuers worked several days to pull him out of the well. An outpouring of sympathy and condolences to his family came from his village in northern Morocco. Others who sent their condolences to the family included King Mohammed of Morocco, Pope Francis, and several international football clubs. Ryan fell into the well in Ingran village near the town of Chefchaouen last Tuesday, but his body wasn't pulled out until late Saturday. Many of the weary rescue workers and the hundreds of people who had gathered around the well burst into tears when they heard Ryan was dead. In Nigeria, the governor of Lagos has purchased 2 high-speed trains to start a metro system. Babaji Desanolu, who was in the U.S. state of Wisconsin to purchase the trains, has promised the people of Lagos a mass transit system to ease traffic congestion. VOA's Peter Clotty spoke to Marcus Mukoro, the chief executive officer at Reliance Rail International, about the benefits of the upcoming transit system.
The Targo Series 8 trains, which was a set of trains manufactured by a company called Targo, a Spanish company based in the U.S., were designed for a route between Chicago and Milwaukee for the authorities in Milwaukee. This was done under a Democratic governor at the time. The governors obviously changed hands to Republicans, and the Republicans, fought against procuring those trains. That led to a lawsuit between the state and Targo. Targo won after several years, and were awarded a $50 million settlement for 3 trains. and then the trains became available for sale. So we swooped in and were able to get these trains at a reasonable rate for the state.
So how did you get Babajide Sanwo-Olu, the governor of Lagos, to buy these trains? Who made the initiative?
So it was actually the MD of Lamata, Lagos Area Metropolitan Transit Authority, who had worked with us in the past, that approached us and said, look, the governor's determined to deliver on his promise to have trains running by Q4 2022. The initial thought process was to go straight to electrification, but we made it clear to them that there's no way we could provide EMUs, electrical multiple unit trains, and electrify the line by the end of this year. It just wasn't practical. And apart from the time frame, the cost would have been exorbitant. But the governor was really determined to get things up and running. So we said, look, the best way to go would be to seek some diesel multiple units that will carry passengers in the interim until we were ready to go to electrification. So that's kind of how we.
These trains are fast trains, speed trains. Talk to me about it. Do they have a system to run as fast as it was originally designed?
So that's an interesting one, because Reliance Rail, recommended that we went for these trains, in part because they're available, but the propulsion system, they were designed as a high-speed rail train, but the propulsion system for it that we're intending to utilize is not a high-speed rail propulsion system. So you'll have the comfort. It's almost like you'd have the comfort of a Ferrari without the engine of a Ferrari.
Also, is there an agreement that they will get to that level with technical know-how and maintenance issues?
Well, it's a metro system, so the stations are quite close. There's no real need to go to 300 kilometers an hour, because you won't be able to do it between there's sort of 2 kilometers between stations. So you really can't go that fast.
Right. So talk to me about when the trains get there. Will there be a technology transfer, installation? Talk to me about that process. How are you going to handle it?
Interesting one. Thanks for that question. Reliance Rail is working with Talgo. The thought process is to move the trains into Lagos and have Lagosians work with Reliance Rail and Talgo to retrofit the trains, to reconfigure them, retrofit them to accommodate more passengers, which will create jobs in Lagos, and make the trains look more like a metro train than a regional train, which is what they were designed for initially.
How beneficial will this be for the people of Lagos, or Lagosians as they call them?
Well, one of the biggest problems that anybody will agree on in Lagos is traffic.
Right.
The situation with traffic. The Red Line happens to be, from projections, the busiest corridor of all the 6 corridors that are being looked at right now. And so the Governor Sanwo-Olu really wanted desperately to try and serve that community, ensure that they can reduce the amount of traffic, and just create ease of flow of people from the Agbado axis into Oyingbo and subsequently Marina.
That was VOA's Peter Claude speaking to Marcus Mukoro, the Chief Executive Officer of Reliance Rail International. A report commissioned by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and released Monday reveals that police and intelligence services failed to anticipate and disrupt days of arson and looting last year, in which more than 300 people died. The violence was sparked by the imprisonment of former President Jacob Zuma for defying a court order to testify at a corruption inquiry, and fanned by anger over the poverty and inequality that persists almost 3 decades after the end of apartheid. The government deployed soldiers to restore calm as shops were ransacked and key infrastructure targeted. but several $billions of damage was caused, according to Reuters. On Thursday, President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to say what action the government will take in response to that report. The 35th African Union Summit has ended in Addis Ababa. The heads of state discussed critical issues affecting Africa, including the conflict in Ethiopia, the restoration of constitutional rule following coups in Sudan, Mali, and Guinea, and the continent's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. They are also calling for greater representation at the United Nations. Speeches were delivered at least by 3 heads of state, as well as AU Chairperson Moussa Faki Mahamat and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. More than 70 years after the birth of the African Union, Africa remains poorly represented on the powerful UN Security Council. President Macky Sall of Senegal is the new AU chairperson, replacing Félix Tshisekedi of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Turning to the latest developments in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, French President Emmanuel Macron is visiting Moscow for talks with President Vladimir Putin before going to Kiev on Tuesday. U.S. President Joe Biden and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz are discussing joint efforts to deter further Russian aggression against Ukraine at a White House meeting. Analysts say if Russia does invade Ukraine, up to 50,000 people could be killed and wounded, while up to 5 million people could flee the country, creating a massive European humanitarian emergency. Amid rising tensions with Russia, the White House is warning that the more than 100,000 Russian troops along Ukraine's border could still launch an invasion at a moment's notice. VOA's Arashar Basadi has more.
Paratroopers from the United States 82nd Airborne Division landing in Poland, a show of support among NATO allies amid an ongoing Russian troop buildup along the border of Ukraine.
Our national contribution here in Poland shows our solidarity with all of our allies here in Europe, and obviously during this period of uncertainty, we know that we are stronger together.
In addition to dispatching U.S. troops to NATO allies in Eastern Europe, Washington has sent $650 million in aid to Ukraine, the most ever to that nation, according to the State Department. Ukraine's government has so far downplayed the likelihood of a Russian invasion. Not so, say top U.S. officials.
We believe that there is a very distinct possibility that Vladimir Putin will order an attack on Ukraine. It could take a number of different forms. It could happen as soon as tomorrow, or it could take some weeks yet. He has put himself in a position with military deployments to be able to act aggressively against Ukraine at any time now.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan added that the United States is still a willing partner in diplomacy should Russia choose a path of de-escalation. The crisis along Ukraine's border is helping forge a rare moment of political unity in Washington as members from both major parties decry a possible invasion.
The conditions are there. It's more likely than not. I think the noose is being prepared. It's around Ukraine right now as we speak. These are dangerous times, times of the essence. This would be the largest invasion in Europe since World War II. The time frame, as Jake Sullivan mentioned, is closing in.
Ukrainians, meanwhile, poured into the streets Saturday in a show of strength, vowing to defend their homeland. In Chernobyl, just 10 kilometers from Belarus, the Ukrainian National Guard carries out live fire training. Diplomacy among NATO members and Russia has yet to defuse the crisis. A key sticking point is Russia's demand that Ukraine never be admitted into NATO, a non-starter for the United States. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, jubilation fills the air in Dakar as Senegal's national soccer team wins big. But first, let's check in with Hedy Adams, who tells us about a special edition of Straight Talk Africa coming up on Wednesday.
Welcome to this Town Hall edition of Straight Talk Africa. Join me, Heidi Adams, on a Voice of America Town Hall special as we discuss the coronavirus pandemic. Where will it take us next? We'll hear from global experts and from our audiences across the African continent on the challenges and opportunities as we navigate life during COVID-19, the virus, variants, and vaccines. All that on the next Straight Talk Africa.
The White House is dismissing Friday a meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin, where the two leaders unveiled a strategic alliance aimed at countering the United States. White House Bureau Chief Basirai Kills reports.
The Beijing Winter Olympics started with a geopolitical bang. Just hours before the game's opening on Friday, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin met to unveil a strategic alliance, shown in this video from CCTV.
China and Russia are adhering to their original aspirations and have always maintained steady progress in bilateral relations.
Regarding the relations between our two countries, they are developing really gradually, in the spirit of friendship and strategic partnership.
The move is designed to balance what they portrayed as malign American global influence. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki downplayed the meeting.
What we have control over is our own relationships and the projection of our own values, and also looking for ways to work with countries even where we disagree.
China joined Russia's call to halt NATO's expansion, Moscow's point of contention with the West that Russia claims has caused it to amass troops on its border with Ukraine. Meanwhile, Moscow voiced its support for Beijing's stance that Taiwan is an inalienable part of China. Analysts say the Putin-Xi alliance is designed to counter Washington's narrative that Moscow and Beijing are acting aggressively on Ukraine and Taiwan by claiming that it is the United States that is interfering in their spheres of influence.
They're portraying themselves in many ways as standing up to a revisionist and aggressive United States. So to that, it's actually fairly remarkable. There have been moments in the past where China in particular has been reluctant to kind of look like it's acting directly in concert with Russia. And this is really a step towards making it clear that they are acting together.
Moscow and Beijing also voiced opposition to the AUKUS alliance between Australia, Britain, and the United States, saying it increased the danger of an arms race in the region. Meanwhile, Russia has conducted military exercises with Belarus as part of what analysts say is an effort to intimidate Ukraine by surrounding the country, heightening further fears of invasion. To show support to NATO allies, Biden is sending 2,000 U.S.-based troops to Poland and Germany and shifting 1,000 soldiers from Germany to Romania. Basirai Kills, VOA News, Washington.
As tensions between Russia and Ukraine intensify, European countries are concerned the flow of gas from Russia will be affected. Oksana Bedratenko looks at how Russia's actions against Ukraine may affect Europe's energy sector. Anna Rice narrates her story.
About 40% of the natural gas supplied to European countries like France, Poland, Germany, and Italy comes from Russia. Western powers are concerned Russia will create a pretext to disrupt the flow of gas moving to Europe through Ukraine.
What I do expect would be what I just said, some local incidents, possibly an attack on the Ukrainian pipeline. That's quite likely. And it would also give Russia an excuse to extricate itself from the long-term contract, the transmission contract that it has.
The U.S. has alleged that Russia has a plan to stage an attack and use it as a reason to invade Ukraine. Russia has strongly denied the charge. Experts suspect Russia plans to use its energy supply as leverage to divide Europe. They point to disagreement in Europe over Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which runs from Russia to Germany under the Baltic Sea. The project has been completed, but must still get the approval of regulators in Germany and the European Union. Deborah Kagan, a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, says Russia's strategy is clear.
They're clearly, no question, using this as a political weapon to threaten Europe, and especially threaten those countries who they believe might have a role in approving Nord Stream 2. So Russia's ultimate goal is to get the European Union to change its antitrust rules to allow Russia to not only provide the gas, but own the pipelines and own the type of pressure and the amount of gas that goes through those pipelines.
The US and Europe have warned Russia about the consequences of its aggression toward Ukraine and say sanctions for any military action in the Ukraine will include Nord Stream 2.
With regard to Nord Stream 2, we continue to have very strong and clear conversations with our German allies, and I want to be clear with you today. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
In order to help Europe deal with a potential gas crisis, the United States has approached Qatar and other energy-producing states about providing gas to Europe if Russia cuts off their supply. The International Energy Agency says U.S. exports of liquefied natural gas, or LNG, to Europe in the last quarter of 2021 jumped 40% from last year's totals. But experts say that won't be able to completely make up for the loss of Russian LNG in the short term.
In January, imports of LNG in Europe have been almost at record levels, and half of those were in fact from the US. So there has been a lot of US LNG coming to Europe.
Deborah Kagan believes, however, that a disruption of Russian supplies would directly affect not only Europe, but the US as well.
The United States, while it is telling Europe to cut off Russian gas, is importing about 18 million barrels a month of Russian oil into the United States.
For their part, European countries say they will continue to look for alternative sources of energy to replace their reliance on Russian gas. For Oksana Bedratenko, Anna Rice, VOA News.
A senior U.S. delegation recently visited Lithuania in a show of support in its growing dispute with China over Taiwan. Beijing is blocking imports of Lithuanian goods, and as Henry Ridgwell reports, it has escalated into a trade tussle between the West and Beijing.
Washington is supporting Lithuania in the face of what it called economic coercion by China. The dispute began in 2020 as Lithuania's new government pledged to support what it called freedom fighters in Taiwan and criticized Beijing's human rights record in Hong Kong and Tibet. In November last year, Taiwan officially opened a representative office in the Lithuanian capital, Vilnius.
We are aiming to the strengthening of bilateral relationship comprehensively between Taiwan and Lithuania.
Lithuania said the opening did not affect its policy towards China, but it stoked the fury of Beijing, which counts Taiwan as part of Chinese territory.
From perspective of Beijing, is crossing a line, a real red line on how they approach Taiwan. And this is what led later to Beijing downgrading its embassy in Lithuania.
In December, China effectively blocked Lithuanian imports by delisting it as a country of origin, meaning goods can't clear Chinese customs. Beijing also pressed multinational businesses to sever ties with the country.
And that works not only in some cases for goods that are produced in Lithuania, but also goods that include in their supply chain the components produced in Lithuania.
The European Union accuses China of threatening the EU's single market and has launched a challenge at the World Trade Organization.
We are stepping forward to defend EU's rights. Today we are bringing the case to the WTO.
The WTO challenge will likely take years to resolve. Meanwhile, the dispute is already hitting trade. This shipment of 20,000 bottles of Lithuanian rum was blocked from entering China last month. So instead, Taiwan importers snapped it up. The Taiwanese government has offered a $1 billion credit program and a separate $200 million fund to boost trade with Lithuania. The United States has also stepped in. The US Export-Import Bank signed a $600 million export credit agreement with Lithuania, focused on manufacturing, business services and renewable energy. But it's not just about money.
Symbolic involvement, of course, supports Lithuania by showing that it's not isolated in its moves. At the same time, it also makes it harder to unravel the situation because it once again puts it in the spotlight.
US officials also held talks in Brussels on joint measures to tackle economic coercion. China, meanwhile, accuses Lithuania of betrayal and says it is trying to hijack China-EU relations. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Senegal's capital, Dakar, erupted with jubilation Sunday night as the national soccer team won its first ever Africa Cup of Nations. David Doyle has more.
This is the moment Senegal's capital, Dakar, exploded with triumph. The national team has just won its first ever Africa Cup of Nations. The Lions of Teranga overcame 7-time AFCON winners Egypt on Sunday night, to the delight of those like student Nafi Dia watching at the Africa Reborn monument.
Thank God, we won. We are taking the cup back home. This is our first victory. We are so proud.
And the celebrations were not just in Senegal. Coach Aliou Cissé mobbed by his players at the post-match press conference. His side has, until now, been known as one of the continent's underachieving soccer nations. Cissé said he dedicates the win to the Senegalese people.
Because since independence, we've been chasing our first star. But today, on our shirt, we will have a star too.
At the last tournament in 2019, Senegal lost to Algeria in the final. But this time they arrived in Cameroon as favourites. Their squad is filled with big names from some of Europe's top clubs, most prominent among them, Liverpool striker Sadio Mane. He scored the winning spot kick on Sunday to give Senegal a 4-2 victory on penalties. As the whistle blew in Yaoundé, the party erupted in Dakar. Many here, as across the world, have suffered over the past 2 years in the economic hardship brought about by the global health crisis. But on Sunday night, troubles were forgotten. Thousands poured onto the streets in a cacophony of car horns, cheers and fireworks. As student Sheikh Sek said, "We've had to wait for so long. Now all the wounds are healed."
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. And that wraps up our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.